Stonewall Riots, or as they have been called, the Stonewall Uprising. It began on June the 24th, 1969. What happened that evening is that at the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich, the police, the New York City Police Department, under the authority of the New York State Liquor Authority, raided the facility looking for, and they found, illegal alcohol. The reason being that the Stonewall Inn, when it had opened, was called a bring your bottle only, meaning that clients, individuals, customers going in to the inn, they were to bring their own alcoholic drinks. As it turned out, the Stonewall Inn did, in fact, begin to sell liquor across the bar. And the anti-gay authorities simply did not want gays hanging out at bars. The Genovese family, of the five families, they began to realize that, wait a minute here, there's some money to be made by setting up a place for gay men and women to congregate. Now, in 1966, the law was changed, and that now gay people could in fact go into a bar that sold alcohol. But the Stonewall Inn had become so popular between 66 and 69, the Genovese family never bothered to get a liquor license. On June the 28th, the New York City Police Department, they decided that they were going to raid the same facility once again. And they did. They began to find the illegal booze. They began to arrest the people who were managing the inn, and they began to arrest the customers themselves. The Stonewall Inn was one of the few opening gay bars, now without the old law, opening gay bars that didn't mind cross-dressers or trans individuals coming in. This provoked a reaction then from the customers who were about to be arrested. I mean, there were hundreds of them, and there were really only about a dozen police. The police just thought, we're just going to go in there and do our thing, and everybody else is going to scatter. Well, they didn't. That is what provoked the next 3-4 nights, 6 nights total of uprising, in which the police found that the streets around the Stonewall Inn were being filled with not hundreds, but thousands of gay men and women who were coming from all over the city to demonstrate what had happened at the Stonewall Inn. New organizations were founded, and with money coming in from donations, they began to push very hard for legislation that would protect the civil rights of men and women who happen to have a different sexual orientation.
Hello again, everyone. My name is Candace Crystal, Artistic Director here at American History Theater. I have with me Vanessa Pineda from Breaking Down Barriers. Hello, Vanessa. Welcome.
Hey, Candace. It's so nice to be here with you.
Why don't we have you introduce yourself and tell us about your role at Breaking Down Barriers?
Yes, awesome. Thank you. So yeah, my name is Vanessa Pineda. Pronouns she, her, hers, and I am the LGBTQ outreach coordinator and also the direct manager for the Breaking Down Barriers program, which is a program that aims to reduce mental health stigma in communities of color, the LGBT community, and where those communities intersect.
Awesome. I love that you brought up intersection because we're totally going to talk about that today. We're actually going to be talking about the Stonewall Riots. So I'm going to let you take lead on that and how you feel the Stonewall Riots shaped America today, in addition to the LGBTQIA community's the effect on their mental well-being based on the Stonewall Riots to now.
Yeah, so just for a little bit of context, right, bars historically at this time are seen as very safe places. They're the havens of where people can go to escape, right, institutional racism and prejudice from all of the things that were happening at large at that time, right? People could be arrested for wearing clothing of the opposite gender. And really, homosexuality was still in what we call the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is like where we get our mental disorders, like how we classify them, for example, like anxiety disorder, depression disorder. So homosexuality was still in the DSM as of 1973, which was not well after, which was shortly thereafter the Stonewall Riots, which had happened right in June 28th of 1969. So because of the movement, we actually saw a shift in some of the policies and structural sort of limitations that existed in oppressing people. So I would say that was definitely a direct result of the Stonewall uprising. And how it impacted mental health, and even today, right? Reparative therapy is a way that we take sort of the gay out of people.
Is
And
that
it's
the
actually
conversion therapy thing?
yes,
Oh
it's the
gosh,
conversion therapy thing. Yeah.
outrageous. I've heard of it, but now I'm seeing that states are banning it, and I'm just so happy that on the political side of things we're really taking action there, because it's horrifying to hear some of the stories that come out of these conversion camps.
Yes, absolutely. This is actually a traumatizing event to be told that everything about you is wrong and needs to be changed, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and I think it is important to note how privileged we are to live in California, where there's like 29 states and 4 territories that still have conversion or reparative therapy, where people can still do these practices. So I think it's still this push where we had to have some big large uprising to make this really big shift, and that happened even so long ago, and we're still making um, progress today.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, and I feel like with the LGBT community, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, is it most beneficial for the community to say LGBTQ, LGBTQIA plus? What is the right terminology there? Because I want to make sure I'm getting it right, and I'm sure some of our viewers may have not gotten it right, but want to be really good allies. So, what would be the correct terminology?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, some of the feedback that I've received from folks who work with elders or in the community would be that they prefer LGBT plus, because historically that word queer feels really bad. Where we've done a reclaiming with some of the younger generations now to do that.
Mhm.
Um, and I would say that most people feel best around LGBTQIA plus, because there is this invisibleness as it relates to individuals who are intersex, and some of the really horrific things that have been done to them, and the erasure that's happened to their identities. And so I think a lot of folks in that community feel like it's very important um, to have the I in there. And the A for me stands for ace or asexual. So just to acknowledge that piece too.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, because I know sometimes I always say, well, I want to be an ally.
Mhm.
I know I'm not necessarily going to get it right every time, but I want to strive for that. I want to strive to like make people feel as included as possible. And I've definitely had like shortfalls, and I'm like, cool, I messed up. Help me get better so I can always make sure and help correct other people even. And so that's the hard part, I think, with allyship, is sometimes we fall short and we don't want to admit we fall short, out of fear, because everybody now, it's like call out culture. And
Yeah,
I think that there's this really beautiful parallel from the Stonewall riots to the current riots that are happening based on the Black Lives Matter movement.
yeah.
I feel that this oppression, these oppressed groups are constantly having to fight for basic human and civil rights that, when you look at a situation like the Stonewall riots, I mean, I didn't even know homosexuality was in the DSM until the 70s. Like,
Mhm.
what a world. What a world.
What a world. Yes,
And
absolutely.
so we're talking about this effect on the mental well-being of people in the LGBTQIA plus community.
Mhm.
And I can only imagine to have this like dialogue of,
Mhm.
we were in the DSM as a mental illness for so long,
Mhm.
and how that kind of shapes the community, if you
Mhm.
will.
Yeah, I mean, and you'll see this in other communities as well who
Mhm.
had diagnoses in the DSM to justify things like beating a runaway slave, right? So, I mean, there's so many layers there, and I do want to draw attention that you know different folks from different movements were at the Stonewall uprising because it lasted for 5 days. So, folks from Black Panther parties and other different um, coalitions and groups were there, and so I would say. There are a lot of similarities in what's happening now and also what's happened historically, right? So, this like coming together of communities is so necessary for us to create real justice and real movement and changes that we want to see in society. It's not just up to one group to make it happen, it's these um, alliances that we build that not only make us feel like we're not alone, right? Because oftentimes we feel that struggle internally or mentally when it's like, I've got this weight on my shoulders, I have to carry it alone. But when we exist in community, it really gives us a larger sense of purpose and a larger ability to complete our mission around justice. Um, so yes, I do see a lot of similarities in what's happening today in terms of allyship for myself, obviously with the Black Lives Matter movement, um, or just other movements in general. How can we show up and show solidarity for each other in an active way, in a real way, doing the best that we can,
Yeah, we're all just trying to do the best we can. You talked a little bit about intersectionality, and I don't know if our viewers know a whole lot about it. Would you mind kind of expounding on what intersectionality is?
Yeah, sure. So this is something that was developed or coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, and she is brilliant. And basically, it's these layering of identities. So, for example, I can use myself. I identify as Latinx. I identify as queer. I identify as a femi or a woman. And so these layers of my existence um, create potentially different experiences for me based on privileges that society gives to certain people. And so even acknowledging my own privilege, I think, is part of that process and really understanding intersectionality. So, for example, I am grateful that I was able to get my master's degree in social work, and that's so rare for communities of color in general. So, I think acknowledging our own privileges, I'm an able-bodied person, things like this, that those are really the layers of intersectionality and how they give breath to our existence and how we live.
One thing that I love having the conversation about, because I'm like, I am a Black woman, yes, but I can't have one without the other. I can't have
Hmm.
my Blackness for my womanhood or vice versa. And I think that's a really interesting reality a lot of people are starting to acknowledge and understand, and at least try to get a better understanding for. So if anyone wanted to talk about the resources from Breaking Down Barriers, specifically what you do there, where
Hmm.
could they look? Where would you suggest that they go? And I know we'll have it all on a graphic and in our description box, but what would maybe be your first couple of places for them to go to?
Yeah, you could go to any of our social media accounts. We have one on Facebook, which is breakingdownbarriers.sd, or on Instagram, which is bdb.sd, or you can even check us out on the Jewish Family Service website. If you just search in Breaking Down Barriers, our program will come up, as well as all of the things that we do, which also include cultural humility training. So not only do we really advocate for um, expanding the ideas of mental health and well-being within our own communities, and reclaiming a lot of practices that have been stripped from us, but also we train other professionals in how to best work with these populations.
That's amazing. And if someone wanted to reach you specifically, Vanessa, where could they get you?
Yeah, so my email address is my name, which is Vanessa P at jfssd.org.
Excellent. And any final thoughts before we let you go today?
Yeah, I would just say if you're local to San Diego, there's some really beautiful resources out there. I really feel like one thing that's come out of COVID is we've all really acknowledged that our mental health is a priority. Our health and well-being is sacred, and there's some great places that are still doing online services, like the LGBT Center um, here in Hillcrest, or the North County LGBT Resource Center. There's also the Gender Fluid Collective. When we speak about intersectionality, this is really all that they're about. This is a BIPOC LGBTQIA plus organization, so I highly recommend that, as well as trans family support services. So encourage y'all to reach out.
Thank you. That's such an extensive list. I love it. And we will make sure our viewers have a copy of that list as well. Thank you again for being here, Vanessa. We greatly appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. As always, it's so lovely to see you.
Oh, yes, you too. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in for another episode of Continuing the Conversation. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Down, everything about a gay community is positive, and that is the legacy of the Stonewall Inn, when men and women around the country refused to say, okay, continue to beat up on us. We have had enough. President Obama in 2016 proclaimed that the Stonewall Inn today is now a national monument.